The rain started at exactly 11:13 p.m. Not a gentle rain. Not the kind that taps softly against windows. This rain sounded angry. It hammered the streets of Portland, Oregon, turning roads into rivers and drowning the city beneath a curtain of darkness. Inside a worn-out moving truck, 28-year-old Daniel Mercer tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The windshield wipers fought desperately against the storm. Daniel hated moving, but after losing his job, ending a 4-year relationship, and draining most of his savings, he hadn't had many choices left. The apartment he was moving into was cheap, too cheap. That should have been his first warning. The building stood at the end of a forgotten street where no one seemed to walk. No stores, no traffic, no lights. Just an aging brick structure looming in the darkness. The sign above the entrance flickered weakly. Blackwood Apartments. One of the letters blinked on and off. Daniel parked. For a moment he simply stared. The building looked abandoned. Yet every window was dark except one. A single yellow light glowed from the 4th floor. Watching. Waiting. Daniel shook off the feeling. "You need a place to sleep," he muttered. The thunder answered. Boom! The sound rattled the truck. He stepped outside. Immediately the rain soaked his jacket. As he carried the first box toward the entrance, he noticed something strange. The street behind him was empty. Completely empty. No parked cars, no pedestrians, nothing. It felt as if the city ended at the edge of the property. The front door opened before he reached it. An old woman stood inside. She looked ancient. Not 80. Not 90. Older. Her skin resembled yellow paper stretched over bone. Her eyes appeared cloudy, yet somehow she looked directly at him. Daniel Mercer. He froze. "I do." "Yes?" "I know." The woman smiled. Something about that smile felt wrong. Not friendly, not welcoming, hungry. She stepped aside. "Welcome home." Daniel forced a polite smile and entered. The lobby smelled like damp wood and mildew. An antique chandelier hung overhead. Several bulbs flickered. The old woman sat behind a reception desk. Daniel noticed she had no computer, no phone, only a thick black ledger. "You must be Mrs. Graves, the landlord." She nodded. "Apartment 13. Daniel blinked. "I thought it was apartment 14. Mrs. Graves slowly turned the ledger toward him. Written in faded ink beside his name. "Apartment 13. There's no apartment 14. Daniel frowned. The online listing clearly said apartment 14. He remembered it, yet arguing seemed pointless. "Okay." Mrs. Graves slid a brass key across the desk. The number engraved on it was 13. Then she leaned forward. Her smile disappeared. "One rule." Daniel sighed. Every apartment had rules. No loud music? No. Quiet hours? No. Mrs. Graves stared directly into his eyes. "Never open your door after midnight." Silence. Rain battered the windows. Daniel laughed nervously. Oddly specific. The old woman didn't laugh. "If someone knocks after midnight, ignore it." Daniel smiled. "Even if it's a neighbor? Ignore it." "What if it's an emergency?" "Ignore it." "What if? Ignore it." The words came out sharper than before. For a second, Daniel thought he saw genuine fear in her eyes. Then it vanished. She leaned back. Conversation over. Daniel grabbed the key. The elevator didn't work. A handwritten sign hung over the doors. Out of service. He carried boxes up 4 flights of stairs. The hallway on the 4th floor seemed unusually long. Far longer than the building should allow. A narrow corridor stretched into darkness. Only a few weak lights illuminated the space. Doors lined both sides. All closed, all silent. Then he found apartment 13. The door stood at the very end. The brass numbers looked newer than everything else, as though the door had recently been replaced. Daniel unlocked it. The apartment surprised him. It was clean, spacious, almost luxurious compared to the rest of the building. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. Everything looked normal. For the first time all night, Daniel relaxed. Maybe the place wasn't so bad. Maybe the creepy landlord was simply eccentric. He spent the next hour unpacking. By 11:57 p.m., exhaustion settled over him. He collapsed onto the couch. The storm continued outside. His eyelids grew heavy. Then, knock. Daniel sat upright. Knock echoed from somewhere beyond the apartment. He checked his phone. 11:58 p.m. Probably another tenant. Knock, knock, knock. 3 more. Slow, measured, almost deliberate. Daniel walked toward the door. The knocks stopped. Silence. He looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Weird. He returned to the couch. 11:59 p.m. 1 minute before midnight. Thunder exploded overhead. The lights flickered. Then the power died. Darkness swallowed the apartment. Great. Daniel searched for his flashlight. Outside the door, knock, knock, knock. His heart skipped. Midnight. Exactly midnight. Graves' warning flashed through his mind. Ignore it. Daniel rolled his eyes. Ridiculous. Another knock. Louder this time. Then a voice. A little girl's voice. Please help me. Daniel froze. The voice sounded close. Very close. I'm lost. Knock, knock, knock. Please. Every instinct told him to open the door. A child was outside, alone, in a blackout. But something felt wrong. The voice never trembled, never cried, never sounded scared. It sounded rehearsed, like an actor reading lines. Daniel slowly approached the peephole. He looked through it. The hallway was empty. No little girl. Nobody. Yet the voice continued, directly outside the door. Please help me. A cold sensation crawled up his spine. Then the voice changed. Instantly, without warning. Now it sounded like a grown man. Open the door. Daniel stumbled backward. His pulse exploded. The voice changed again. This time it sounded exactly like his ex-girlfriend. Daniel? He felt sick. No. Whisper. Soft. Barely audible. Right outside. Open. The doorknob moved. Slowly. Turning. Testing. Daniel couldn't breathe. The door remained locked. The knob stopped. Silence returned. The wood. Scrap. Like fingernails or claws. The sound continued for nearly a minute. Then it stopped. Suddenly. Completely. The power returned. Lights flickered back to life. Daniel rushed to the door. He knew he shouldn't, but curiosity won. He looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Yet something had appeared on the door. Words, scratched deeply into the paint. 3 words. You looked. Daniel's blood turned cold, because he had never opened the door. And there was only one way anything outside could know he had looked through the peephole. Far down the hallway, a figure stood motionless, watching him. Tall, thin, too thin, its head touched the ceiling. Its face remained hidden in darkness. Daniel blinked. The figure vanished, gone, as if it had never existed. Behind him, a whisper emerged from inside the apartment. Not outside, inside, directly behind him. You shouldn't have looked. Daniel slowly turned around and saw someone standing in the middle of his living room. Someone who wasn't there a second earlier. Someone smiling. Someone wearing clothes from another century. Someone with no eyes. Daniel couldn't move. The figure stood in the center of his living room. Tall, motionless, smiling. Its clothes looked as though they belonged to another century. A black suit, faded and stained with age. The fabric hung loosely from its skeletal frame. But the worst part wasn't the clothing. It was the face, or rather, the absence of one. Where the eyes should have been were two dark holes. Not empty sockets, holes. Deep black voids that seemed to descend forever. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The thing tilted its head, slowly, almost curiously. Then it spoke. Its voice sounded like dozens of voices layered together. Men, women, children, old people, all speaking at once. You looked. Daniel stumbled backward. What are you? The smile widened, far wider than any human smile could. You looked. The apartment lights flickered. The creature vanished. Gone. Just like that. Daniel stood frozen. Every part of him expected the thing to appear behind him, or beside him, or underneath the bed, but nothing happened. The apartment remained silent. The storm continued outside. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Finally, Daniel convinced himself that stress and exhaustion had caused a hallucination. It wasn't possible. None of it. The voices, the figure, the scratches. His mind had to be playing tricks. The words were still there. You looked. Carved deeply into the paint. Real. Physical. Impossible. Daniel didn't sleep. Not that night. Not even for a minute. Morning arrived gray and cold. Rain clouds still covered the city. Daniel immediately left the apartment. He needed coffee and answers. The hallway looked normal now. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. Just a long corridor with old doors. Apartment 3. Apartment 5. Apartment 7. Apartment 9. Apartment 11. Apartment 13. Daniel stopped. Something felt wrong. He counted again. There was no apartment 1. No apartment 2. No apartment 4. Half the numbers were missing. The realization sent a chill through him. Had it always been like that? He wasn't sure. At the end of the hallway, he noticed a door slightly open. Inside stood an elderly man watering plants. The first tenant Daniel had seen. The old man looked up. The moment he noticed Daniel's apartment number on the key, his expression changed. Fear. Genuine fear. Then he immediately shut the door. Slam. Daniel stared. What the hell? Later that afternoon, he returned carrying groceries. Graves sat behind the reception desk, writing in her ledger. The same ancient book, the same faded ink. Daniel approached. We need to talk. She didn't look up. No, I saw something. I know. That answer immediately annoyed him. You know? Yes. She turned a page. Daniel slammed his hand onto the desk. What is apartment 13? The old woman finally looked at him. For several seconds she remained silent. Then she said something strange. It wasn't built. What? Apartment 13 wasn't built. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? Mrs. Graves closed the ledger. It appeared. A cold silence settled between them. Daniel almost laughed. Almost. Because her expression showed she completely believed what she was saying. You're serious? Unfortunately. Daniel sat down. The old woman stared toward the stairwell, as though making sure nobody listened. Then she spoke quietly. Blackwood Apartments was built in 1891. Daniel listened. Everything was normal until 1913. Of course, the number again. One night, 13 tenants disappeared. Daniel frowned. Disappeared? Mrs. Graves nodded. No bodies, no evidence, no explanation. The lobby suddenly felt colder. What happened? Nobody knows. That's impossible. She shook her head. Impossible came later. Daniel remained silent. The old woman leaned closer. 3 days after the disappearance, workers entered the 4th floor. Her hands trembled slightly. They found a new apartment. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. No. Yes. Apartment 13. The old woman nodded. It had never existed before. Outside, thunder rumbled. Daniel's pulse quickened. That's insane. Mrs. Graves looked exhausted. I've managed this building for 47 years. Then tell me what's happening. The old woman whispered. Something lives there. Daniel laughed nervously. No, it does. No, it always has. Graves stared directly into his eyes. And now, it knows your name. That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. Around 10 p.m., he began searching online. Very little information existed about Blackwood Apartments. Strangely little. Almost as if records had been removed. Eventually, he found an archived newspaper article from 1913. The headline read, 13 Vanish in Portland Mystery. The article described missing tenants, missing police officers, missing investigators. Anyone who stayed too long in apartment 13 eventually disappeared. Daniel continued reading. Then he found something even worse, a photograph. Black and white, grainy, ancient, taken inside the building. A group of residents stood in the lobby. Daniel zoomed in. One face immediately caught his attention. A man standing in the back, tall, thin, wearing an old black suit, smiling. The same figure, the same clothes, the same impossible grin. The photograph was dated 1913. Daniel stared. His hands trembled. The figure hadn't changed. Not at all. Not even slightly. Then he noticed something else. The man had no eyes, only darkness. The laptop screen suddenly flickered, then turned black. The apartment lights dimmed, and a whisper drifted from the bedroom. Daniel. He froze. The voice sounded close, very close. Again. Daniel. Slowly he stood. The voice came from the bedroom. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he grabbed a kitchen knife and walked toward the doorway. 1 step, 2, 3. The bedroom was dark, completely dark. The hallway light behind him barely illuminated the room. Daniel pushed the door open. Nothing. Empty. Then he heard breathing. Heavy breathing. From beneath the bed. Daniel's blood froze. The sound continued. Slow. Wet. Animal-like. Something was underneath. Breathing. Waiting. Daniel raised the knife. The breathing stopped. Silence. Absolute silence. Then, a hand emerged. Long, pale fingers slowly slid from beneath the bed. Then another. Then another. Too many fingers. Far too many. And something began crawling out. Its limbs bent the wrong way. Its skin looked gray. Dead. Its head scraped against the floor as it dragged itself forward. Daniel backed away. The creature continued crawling. Faster, faster, faster. Then suddenly, it stopped. Its head jerked upward. The face looked exactly like Daniel. Every detail, every feature, every scar. His own face smiled back at him. Found you. The lights exploded. Darkness swallowed the apartment, and from every room came the sound of footsteps. Not one set, not two, dozens, moving through the apartment, approaching him from every direction. And somewhere among those footsteps, something laughed. A laugh that sounded impossibly old. A laugh that had been waiting inside apartment 13 for more than a century. Darkness swallowed everything. Daniel couldn't see the walls, couldn't see the floor, couldn't even see his own hands. Yet he could hear them. Footsteps, dozens of footsteps, moving through apartment 13. Some sounded close, others sounded far away, but all of them were coming toward him, slowly, patiently, as if they already knew there was nowhere he could escape. Daniel gripped the kitchen knife so tightly his knuckles hurt. His breathing became shallow. The darkness felt wrong. Not normal darkness. It felt thick, heavy, almost alive. Then he heard a voice, Directly beside him, Daniel. He spun around. Nothing. The voice came again, this time from behind him. Daniel. A cold sensation crawled up his neck. The voice belonged to him, his own voice. Before he could react, the lights suddenly flashed back on. For a split second, and in that brief flash, he saw them. People, standing all around him. At least 20, maybe 30. Men, women, children. Every single one staring at him. Every single one smiling. Then the lights died again. The apartment returned to darkness. Daniel stumbled backward. His shoulder hit a wall. The footsteps stopped. Every sound stopped. Then a single sentence emerged from the darkness. "We've been waiting." The voice wasn't human. It sounded like hundreds of voices speaking together. The same voice he had heard from the eyeless figure. The Hollow Tenant. Daniel ran. Instinct took over. He burst from the bedroom and sprinted through the apartment. The hallway outside his apartment couldn't be worse than staying inside. He reached the front door, unlocked it, and threw it open. The hallway beyond was empty. Daniel rushed outside. The door slammed behind him. For several seconds he stood there, breathing heavily. Safe. At least safer. Then he noticed something strange. The hallway wasn't the same. The lights were gone. The walls looked older, much older. Wallpaper peeled from the walls. Water stains covered the ceiling. The air smelled rotten. Daniel turned around. Apartment 13 had vanished. The door was gone. Only a blank section of wall remained. His blood turned cold. He touched the wall. Solid brick. There had never been a door there. At least that's what it looked like. Then a distant scream echoed through the corridor. A woman, terrified, begging for help. The scream came from farther down the hallway. Daniel hesitated, then moved toward it. Each step made the floorboards creak. The building felt ancient, dead, like a place abandoned for decades. The scream came again, closer now. Daniel reached a corner, turned it, and froze. A little girl stood in the hallway, maybe 8 years old, wearing clothes from another era. She looked pale, almost transparent. The girl stared at him, then whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." Daniel swallowed. "Who are you?" "My name is Clara." The girl looked frightened, not of him, of something else, something much worse. "It's awake again." Daniel immediately knew what she meant. The Hollow Tenant? The girl's face drained of color. "Don't say its name." A loud bang echoed somewhere deep inside the building. The floor shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Clara looked toward the sound. Terror filled her eyes. "It's looking for you." Daniel stepped closer. "What is this place?" The little girl remained silent. Then she pointed toward the end of the hallway. A red door stood there. Unlike everything else, the door looked new. Fresh paint, bright color. If it didn't belong, that's where it came from. Daniel stared. "What came from?" Clara whispered, "The thing that wears faces." Another bang echoed through the building, louder this time. The red door trembled. Something struck it from the other side. Once, twice, 3 times. Daniel's pulse exploded. Then came scratching, long, slow, deliberate, like claws dragging across wood. The little girl backed away. Tears filled her eyes. "You have to leave." "How?" "Before it finds you." The lights flickered. For the first time since entering the hallway, electricity appeared. Weak yellow light illuminated the corridor, and Daniel finally saw the walls clearly. Names, thousands of names, carved into the wallpaper, covering every inch. Men, women, children. Some names dated back more than a century. Others were recent, very recent. Daniel's heart nearly stopped when he found the newest one. Written near eye level, fresh, still wet. Daniel Mercer, his own name, carved into the wall as if someone had added it moments ago. Behind him, a voice whispered, "Found you." Daniel spun around. The little girl was gone. The hallway was empty. Then he saw the shadow, at the far end of the corridor. Tall, thin, impossible. The hollow tenant stood motionless beneath. A flickering light. Its eyeless face pointed directly at him. Its smile stretched wider than ever, and then it started walking. Not running, walking, slowly, confidently, as though it knew the outcome. Daniel turned and ran. The hallway seemed endless. Every corner led to another corridor. Every staircase led nowhere. The building had become a maze, a trap. He burst through a stairwell door, raced down 3 flights, and entered the lobby. Only it wasn't the lobby he remembered. The reception desk was gone. The furniture was gone. Everything looked older, decayed. Then he saw the ledger, Graves' ledger, lying open on a table. Daniel approached cautiously. Thousands of names filled the pages. Every tenant who had ever lived here. Every victim. The final page contained only 13 names. The original 13 missing tenants from 1913. And beneath them, a blank line, waiting. As Daniel stared, invisible writing slowly appeared across the paper. Letter by letter. D-A-N-I-E-L. His own name began writing itself into the ledger. Daniel slammed the book shut. Immediately, the building shook violently. A roar echoed through the halls. Not human, not animal. Something ancient, something furious. Then he heard footsteps again. Closer than before. Much closer. Daniel looked up. The hollow tenant stood only 20 feet away, smiling, watching, waiting, and for the first time, it spoke a complete sentence. Everyone leaves eventually. Its voice sounded like a graveyard speaking. Daniel backed away. The creature took another step. Its body stretched unnaturally. Bones cracked beneath its skin. Its limbs grew longer. Its smile widened. Then every light in the building exploded at once. Darkness consumed everything again. And somewhere inside that darkness, hundreds of hands reached toward Daniel. The darkness inside Blackwood Apartments was no longer silence. It was breathing. Daniel stood completely still, trying to convince himself that what he was feeling wasn't real. But the air around him was heavy, like something enormous was standing just beyond his sight, watching him, studying him, the way a man studies an insect trapped under glass. Then came the whisper again, soft, close. Daniel? He turned sharply. Nothing, but the sound didn't stop. Daniel? This time it came from behind him. He spun again. Still nothing. But now he noticed something worse. The building was no longer stable. The hallway behind him was wrong. The walls seemed to ripple slightly, like fabric being pulled too tight. The ceiling bent downward in places it shouldn't. The floor creaked, even though nothing was moving. It felt like the apartment itself was holding its breath. Daniel swallowed hard. Okay, this isn't real. But even as he said it, something inside him knew that wasn't true anymore. Because reality doesn't behave like this. Reality doesn't watch you back. A faint scratching sound started beneath his feet. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Daniel froze. His eyes dropped to the floor. Please, no. The sound grew louder. Not random, not scattered. Focused, like something beneath the building was tracing him, following him, learning exactly where he stood. Then, a crack formed in the floor, a thin line, then another, then another. The wood, no, not wood anymore, began to split in geometric patterns, like veins spreading under skin. Daniel stumbled back. No. The floor rose slightly under his feet, not collapsing, not breaking, rising, like something underneath was pushing upward. A hand exploded through the floorboards. White, thin, too long. The fingers curled and grabbed air before gripping the edge of the crack. Then another hand. Then another. The floor wasn't breaking open. It was being opened from below. Daniel screamed and jumped backward as the entire section of hallway burst upward like a living wound. The sound was horrifying. Wood, metal, and something softer tearing all at once. The floor collapsed inward, revealing something that should not exist. A hollow space, but not empty, filled with movement. Hundreds of shifting shapes. Fingers, arms, faces half-formed in darkness. Whispers, rising like steam. And from within it, a sound. Not a scream, not a growl. A voice that sounded like a crowd speaking in perfect unison. "We are underneath." Daniel staggered back, his legs nearly giving out. What are you?" The answer came instantly. "We are what you left behind." The hole in the floor expanded. The walls began to shake violently. Pictures fell. Lights flickered. Somewhere far down the hallway, a door slammed open and shut repeatedly on its own. The entire building was reacting like an animal in pain. Then came footsteps, but not from one direction, from every direction at once. Above him, below him, behind him, inside the walls. Daniel turned in panic. "Stop!" But the footsteps only grew louder. The Hollow Tenant wasn't walking anymore. It was assembling. The hallway lights burst one by one, leaving him in flickering darkness. And then, a voice came from the shadows ahead. Calm, familiar. Mrs. Graves. "Daniel." He turned toward the sound. She stood at the end of the hallway. But she looked wrong. Not injured, not monstrous, just tired. Like someone who had been awake for 100 years. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. Daniel took a step forward. "What is this place? Tell me the truth." Mrs. Graves looked down, then back up, and for the first time her voice cracked. "It was never a building." Daniel froze. "What?" She stepped closer. "It was made to hold something that could not be buried." The floor beneath them trembled again. Another hand shot up through the hallway behind Daniel. He didn't even turn this time. He was too afraid to. Mrs. Graves continued. "In 1913, 13 tenants disappeared, but that's not what happened." Daniel whispered, "Then what happened?" Her eyes darkened. "They were not taken." A pause. "They were used." The hallway lights flickered violently. The walls groaned. And then, a shape began forming at the far end of the corridor. Tall, thin, unnatural. The Hollow Tenant, but not fully formed yet. It was assembling itself from the darkness, like smoke learning how to become a body. Its head tilted slightly, and even from this distance, Daniel could feel it looking directly at him. Mrs. Graves stepped between them. "Listen to me," she said urgently. "You are not the first person to enter apartment 13. Daniel shook his head. "No, I don't care anymore. Just get me out." Her voice sharpened. "You don't understand. There is no out unless it chooses a replacement." That word hit him hard. Replacement. The Hollow Tenant took a step forward. The hallway bent slightly as it moved, like reality itself was adjusting to its presence. Daniel stepped backward. "No, I'm not staying here." Mrs. Graves grabbed his arm. "You already are." A sudden roar erupted from beneath them. The hole in the floor expanded again, swallowing more of the hallway. Hands reached upward, grabbing at air, grabbing at time. The Hollow Tenant raised its arm, and everything stopped. Not silence, not stillness. Pause, like the world itself had been frozen mid-breath. Graves whispered urgently. "It controls the structure. The building is its body." Daniel looked horrified. "Then how do we kill it?" For the first time, she hesitated, then whispered, "You don't." The Hollow Tenant spoke again, but now its voice was different. Not layered, not chaotic, focused, clear. "You cannot leave what you have entered." The walls cracked, reality bent, and suddenly, Daniel saw something impossible. The entire building from the outside. Blackwood Apartments, but it wasn't a building. It was a mass of connected rooms, stacked like organs. And in the center, a void, a mouth, a throat. The Hollow Tenant was not inside the building. The building was inside it. Daniel staggered back. No, this isn't real. Mrs. Graves whispered. It becomes what people believe it is. A long silence. Then, the entity stepped forward again. The world resumed motion, and the hallway collapsed inward. Daniel ran. This time there was no thinking, only survival. Walls shifted around him. Doors appeared and vanished. Staircases led nowhere. The building was actively changing to trap him. Behind him, Graves shouted, "The red door!" He turned mid-run. At the end of the corridor, a red door appeared again. Fresh paint, perfectly still, waiting. The only thing in the entire building not moving. Daniel sprinted toward it. The floor beneath him cracked open again. Hands grabbed his ankle. He fell forward, slid, reached. The red door loomed above him. And behind him, the Hollow Tenant stood closer than ever before, smiling, because it knew he would choose the door. Daniel grabbed the handle, and for a fraction of a second, everything stopped again. The entity whispered, "Good choice." Click. The door opened, and reality ended. Inside was not a room, not a hallway, not even darkness. It was something worse. A memory of every tenant who had ever lived. Voices screaming in layers, walls made of names, doors leading into other doors, endless looping corridors of human lives that never escaped. Daniel stood at the center of it and understood the truth. Apartment 13 was not a place. It was a cycle, a rotation, a hunger that never stopped. And now, it had chosen him to continue it. Behind him, the Hollow Tenant stepped through the red door and smiled. Not because it had won, but because it had finally found someone who understood what it was becoming. Daniel whispered, "This never ends, does it?" The entity answered softly, "No." A pause. "It only changes names." The red door slammed shut behind Daniel. The sound echoed forever. Not through a hallway, not through a building, through something much larger, something alive. Daniel stood motionless. His breathing echoed in the darkness around him. But it wasn't really darkness. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he was standing inside an enormous chamber. A chamber so large he couldn't see its end. The walls stretched upward into blackness. The ceiling was invisible. The air smelled old, ancient, like dust trapped inside a tomb for centuries. Then Daniel noticed the walls. His stomach dropped. Names, thousands upon thousands of names. Every inch of every wall was covered with them. Carved, scratched, burned, written in blood-red ink. Names of people, children, teenagers, adults, entire families. Some names looked fresh, others were nearly erased by time. Yet everyone remained visible, waiting, watching. Daniel stepped closer. The nearest names carried dates beside them. 1913, 1914, 1915, 1916, 1917, 1918, 1919, 1920, 1921. The dates never stopped. The wall contained more than a century of victims. And then he found it. Near eye level, freshly carved, still unfinished. Daniel Mercer. His blood froze. His own name, half completed. As if someone had begun writing it, but hadn't finished yet. A whisper drifted through the chamber. Not yet. Daniel spun around. The Hollow Tenant stood 50 feet away, motionless, watching. Its eyeless face somehow felt more expressive here, almost curious. Daniel's voice trembled. "What are you?" The entity tilted its head. For several seconds it said nothing. Then, "I don't remember." That answer surprised him. "You don't remember?" The creature slowly approached. I remember hunger. Step. I remember loneliness. Step. I remember being buried. Step. I remember waking. Step. Daniel felt every hair on his body rise. Buried. The words stayed in his mind. What were you before? The Hollow Tenant stopped walking. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in its voice. I don't know. Silence. Then another voice interrupted. The little girl's voice. That's a lie. Daniel turned. Clara stood nearby. The ghost girl from before. But she looked different now. Stronger. Less transparent. As though this place gave her power. The Hollow Tenant didn't react. Clara pointed toward the far side of the chamber. Come with me. Daniel hesitated. The Hollow Tenant simply watched, not stopping them, not moving. Almost as if it wanted him to go. Clara led Daniel through endless rows of names. The deeper they traveled, the older the writing became. The dates changed. 1900, 1901, 1902, 1903. Daniel stopped. Wait, his voice shook. Blackwood Apartments was built in 1891. Clara nodded. I know. Daniel stared at the wall. Then how are their names older than the building? The little girl's expression darkened. Because it existed before the building. Cold fear spread through Daniel's chest. What? Clara continued walking. The apartment was built on top of it. What is it? The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she led him toward a gigantic iron door at the edge of the chamber. The door was enormous, at least 30 feet tall, covered in rust, covered in chains, covered in hundreds of handprints. Human handprints, children's handprints, adult handprints. Some looked burned into the metal, others looked scratched there in desperation. Daniel stared. What is this? Clara whispered. The first room. The words chilled him. The first room? She nodded. The place where it began. Daniel swallowed. Every instinct screamed at him not to open that door. But curiosity won. Slowly he pushed. The iron groaned. The chains rattled. The door opened, and the smell hit him immediately. Rot, earth, something ancient. Inside lay a stone chamber. Small, cramped, nothing like the endless space outside. At the center stood a wooden coffin. Daniel froze. The coffin looked centuries old. The wood was blackened with age. Symbols had been carved into every surface. Not religious symbols. Not anything he recognized. Clara stared at the coffin. Fear filled her eyes. Before it became the Hollow Tenant. Silence. It was inside there. Daniel approached slowly. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. What was inside? The little girl whispered, a man. The room suddenly felt colder. A man? Clara nodded. He wasn't human anymore. Daniel looked down at the coffin. Something scratched from inside. Once, twice, 3 times. Daniel nearly jumped backward. What the hell was that? The scratching stopped. Then a voice emerged. A weak voice. Old. Ancient. Help me. Daniel froze. The voice came from inside the coffin. Help me. Clara immediately grabbed his arm. Don't listen. The voice continued. I'm trapped. Daniel stared. The voice sounded real, human, desperate. I've been here so long. Clara shook her head. Don't answer. The voice laughed, instantly, without warning. The desperate tone vanished. The laugh was deep, cruel, inhuman. The same laugh Daniel had heard inside apartment 13. The Hollow Tenant. The coffin began shaking violently. Daniel backed away. The entire room trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air became heavier. Then the coffin lid exploded upward. Boom! Wood splintered across the chamber. Daniel shielded his face. For several seconds, neither he nor Clara moved. Then they looked. The coffin was empty. Completely empty. The Hollow Tenant had never been. Inside, something worse had happened. It had escaped, long ago, and left the coffin behind. A sudden roar echoed through the endless chamber outside. The walls shook. Thousands of names vibrated simultaneously. The Hollow Tenant had become angry, very angry. Clara grabbed Daniel. "We have to go." They ran, back through the iron door, back into the Hall of Names. But something had changed. The Hollow Tenant was no longer standing where they left it. It was gone. Daniel immediately felt fear, because somehow its absence felt worse. Then came the whisper, directly behind him. "Now you know." Daniel turned. Nothing there. The whisper moved, now beside him. "Now you understand." Then above him, then everywhere. The chamber darkened. The names covering the walls began bleeding. Red liquid streamed downward. Thousands of names, thousands of victims. The entire chamber looked alive. And then the voices started. Hundreds, thousands, every victim speaking at once. Some cried, some screamed, some begged, some laughed. The noise became unbearable. Daniel dropped to his knees, hands over his ears. But it didn't help. The voices weren't entering through sound. They were entering through his mind. Memories flooded him. Not his memories, theirs. A woman disappearing behind a door in 1924. A boy hearing scratching beneath his bed in 1951. A firefighter investigating apartment 13 in 1976. A college student vanishing in 2004. A businessman opening the door after midnight in 2021. Daniel experienced all of them at once. Every death, every disappearance, every moment of terror. Then suddenly, silence. Absolute silence. Daniel lifted his head. The chamber was gone. The walls were gone. The names were gone. Only darkness remained. And in that darkness stood one figure, the Hollow Tenant, closer than ever before. Its eyeless face stared directly into him. Daniel finally understood something. The entity wasn't hunting him. Not exactly. It was studying him, measuring him, choosing him. The realization terrified him more than anything else. Why me? The question escaped before he could stop it. The Hollow Tenant answered immediately. "Because you stayed." Daniel frowned. "What?" The creature took one slow step forward. Everyone else ran. Another step. "You looked." Another. "You listened." Another. "You followed." Daniel's pulse quickened. The entity continued. "Most leave before they understand." Silence. "You wanted answers." The smile widened. "And answers have a price." The darkness around them began changing. Apartment walls emerged. Hallways formed. Doors appeared. Daniel suddenly recognized the place. Apartment 13. But not the version he knew. This version was much older. Older than the building. Older than Blackwood. Older than Portland itself. The room continued growing around them, as though reality itself was rebuilding. The Hollow Tenant stood at the center, watching, waiting. Then it extended a hand. For the first time, an invitation. Not an attack, not a threat, an invitation. Daniel stared at it. What happens if I take it? The entity remained silent. Its smile never changed. And somehow that silence was more frightening than any answer. Far away, beyond the darkness, Daniel suddenly heard another sound. A voice, Graves. Faint, distant, as though she were calling from another world. "Daniel!" He spun around. The voice came again. "Daniel!" Hope surged through him. For the first time in what felt like forever, Mrs. Graves was alive, somewhere, and she was trying to reach him. The Hollow Tenant's smile slowly disappeared. For the first time, annoyance crossed its face. It turned toward the distant voice, listening, calculating. Then Daniel realized something horrifying. Mrs. Graves wasn't trying to reach him. She was trying to warn him. Because something else was coming. Something powerful enough that even the Hollow Tenant noticed it. The darkness trembled. The endless apartment shook violently. A deep sound echoed from somewhere beyond reality, like a giant door opening. The Hollow Tenant slowly lowered its hand, and for the first time since Daniel met it, it looked afraid. The darkness trembled. Daniel stood frozen inside the impossible version of Apartment 13, while the Hollow Tenant stared into the void beyond him. For the first time since Daniel had met it, the creature wasn't smiling. It was listening, waiting, and somehow afraid. The distant voice returned. Daniel, Mrs. Graves, louder this time. The darkness cracked like glass. A line of white light appeared in the air. The Hollow Tenant stepped backward. Daniel immediately noticed something strange. The entity wasn't moving away from him. It was moving away from the light, as if the light itself heard it. The crack widened. A second voice emerged. Not Mrs. Graves. A man's voice. Deep, ancient, powerful. You have hidden long enough. The Hollow Tenant's body suddenly distorted. Its limbs stretched unnaturally. Its smile vanished completely. The darkness around Apartment 13 began shaking violently. Daniel felt the floor shifting beneath him. The impossible room was becoming unstable. "What is happening?" he shouted. No one answered. The crack exploded open. White light flooded the chamber. Daniel raised an arm to shield his eyes. A figure stepped through. A tall man dressed in black. Not a ghost, not a monster, not exactly human either. His face looked strangely ordinary. Yet Daniel immediately understood something. This being was older than the building, older than the city, perhaps older than memory itself. The Hollow Tenant hissed. The sound resembled 1,000 voices screaming at once. The man ignored it. His attention remained fixed on Daniel. "You're still alive." Daniel swallowed. "Who are you?" The man remained silent for several seconds. Then, "My name has been forgotten." The answer didn't help. The man slowly looked toward the Hollow Tenant. "But it remembers me." The creature stepped backward again. Its confidence was gone. Its smile was gone. Its certainty was gone. For the first time, Daniel realized something terrifying. The Hollow Tenant wasn't the most powerful thing connected to Apartment 13. Not even close. Graves suddenly appeared beside Daniel. Not old, not young, different. Almost luminous. Like someone standing halfway between life and death. Daniel stared. "You?" Mrs. Graves gave a tired smile. "I told you there was a balance." The floor shook violently. The Hollow Tenant roared. The chamber darkened. Thousands of voices echoed from every direction. The entity's body began changing. Faces emerged across its skin. Hundreds, thousands, victims. Every person it had consumed. Every tenant. Every lost soul. All trapped inside. The sight was horrifying. Faces moved beneath its flesh, crying, screaming, begging. Daniel felt sick. The man in black remained calm. "You have fed long enough." The Hollow Tenant answered. "We survived." Its voice no longer sounded human. It sounded like an avalanche, a storm, a disaster-given speech. "We endured." The man nodded slowly. "At the cost of others." The entity smiled again, but the smile looked desperate. "You abandoned me." Silence. The man said nothing. The Hollow Tenant's body continued growing. The room expanded with it. Walls cracked. Doors appeared. Hallways twisted endlessly. Apartment 13 was becoming larger, stronger, more unstable. Graves grabbed Daniel's arm. "You need to leave." Daniel shook his head. "What is it?" Her expression darkened. "The first tenant." The answer sent a chill through him. "The first tenant?" Mrs. Graves nodded. A very long time ago, something was imprisoned beneath this land. Daniel looked toward the monstrous entity. The Hollow Tenant? No. Her answer shocked him. The thing beneath the coffin. Daniel froze. The coffin, the ancient room, the scratching from inside. Mrs. Graves continued. People built structures over the prison for centuries. Daniel listened. A church, then a manor, then a hospital, and eventually Blackwood Apartments. Every building had failed. Every generation had forgotten. Every generation had repeated the mistake. Daniel looked toward the man in black. Who is he? Graves whispered. The jailer. The Hollow Tenant screamed. Reality shook. The entity lunged forward. The chamber exploded into motion. Darkness surged across the floor like living water. The jailer raised one hand. The darkness stopped instantly. Not slowed, stopped. The Hollow Tenant roared again, this time louder, angrier. The faces beneath its skin writhed violently. Then something unexpected happened. A little girl stepped from the crowd of trapped faces. Clara. Daniel stared. Clara? Another face emerged, then another, then another. Hundreds of trapped victims began appearing around the entity. Not trapped inside anymore, outside, separate, freeing themselves. The Hollow Tenant suddenly looked frightened. The jailer spoke one sentence. Your prison is breaking. The chamber erupted with screams. The names covering the walls began disappearing, one by one, thousands of names, erasing themselves. The trapped souls were leaving, escaping, returning to wherever they belonged. The Hollow Tenant staggered backward, growing smaller, weaker. Every escaping soul reduced its strength. Daniel watched Clara approach. The little girl smiled, a genuine smile, the first he'd seen from her. Thank you. Daniel's throat tightened. For what? You listened. The answer surprised him. Then Clara faded. Not violently, not painfully, peacefully, like mist disappearing beneath sunlight. She was gone. A firefighter, a college student, an elderly woman, a young boy. Victims from different generations, different centuries, all fading, all leaving. The Hollow Tenant screamed in fury. No! The chamber shook violently. The entity rushed toward Daniel, instinctively, desperately, because Daniel's name remained unfinished. Daniel realized the truth. He was the final anchor, the final replacement. If the Hollow Tenant claimed him, it could survive. The creature reached toward him, its claws inches from his face. Then, Mrs. Graves stepped between them. The impact was enormous. White light exploded outward. Daniel was thrown backward. The Hollow Tenant screamed. Mrs. Graves stood motionless, holding the entity in place, its claws buried in her chest. Yet, she smiled. A sad smile. A relieved smile. Daniel understood. She had been holding this balance for decades, perhaps longer. The old woman looked at him. Finish it. Daniel stared. What? She pointed toward the wall. His name, Daniel Mercer, still unfinished. The Hollow Tenant saw it too, its eyeless face twisted in panic. No. Daniel suddenly understood. The unfinished name connected him to the apartment, connected him to the cycle, connected him to the curse. He ran. The entity fought against Mrs. Graves. The chamber collapsed around them. Walls shattered. Doors vanished. Reality broke apart. Daniel reached the wall. The unfinished name waited. Then he noticed something. The letters weren't carved. They could move, change. Daniel placed a trembling hand against the wall. The Hollow Tenant screamed, "Stop!" But now Daniel knew. The apartment had always worked through names, identity, memory, recognition. So instead of completing his name, he erased it. The first letter vanished. Then another. Then another. The Hollow Tenant shrieked. The sound shook existence itself. Daniel continued, letter by letter, until nothing remained. No name, no replacement, no successor. The cycle had nowhere to continue. The chamber exploded. Light consumed everything. The Hollow Tenant released a final scream. Not angry, not hateful, lonely, terribly lonely. Then it vanished. The darkness vanished with it. The apartment vanished. The names vanished. Everything vanished. Silence. Daniel opened his eyes. Rain tapped softly against glass. He was lying on a sidewalk, outside Blackwood Apartments. Morning sunlight illuminated the street. For several moments he couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Then he looked up. The building was gone. Not damaged, not destroyed. Gone. The lot stood empty, as if nothing had ever existed there. Construction fencing surrounded the property. A sign stood near the entrance. Vacant land. Daniel stared, confused, disoriented. A police officer approached. "Sir, are you okay?" Daniel looked toward the empty lot. "What happened to the building?" The officer frowned. "What building?" Cold fear returned. "The apartment building." The officer looked puzzled. "There hasn't been a building here for years." Daniel felt his blood run cold. Years? He looked again. Empty land. No Blackwood Apartments. No apartment 13. Nothing. The officer helped him stand. "You hit your head?" Daniel didn't answer, because he noticed something lying near the fence. A black ledger. Graves' ledger. He picked it up, opened it. Every page was blank, except one. The final page. A single sentence appeared there, written in elegant handwriting. "Some doors are prisons, others are invitations. Learn the difference." Below the sentence was a name. Not Daniel's, not Clara's, not Mrs. Graves. A name he'd never seen before. The first tenant. Before Daniel could read the rest, the ink faded away. Gone forever. The wind turned the final page. Blank. Nothing remained. Daniel closed the ledger. For the first time in weeks, the world felt quiet. Normal. Safe. But as he walked away, something made him glance back one last time. Just once. At the empty lot. For a brief second, he thought he saw a red door standing alone in the center of the property, waiting. Then it disappeared, and Daniel kept walking, away from apartment 13, away from the Hollow Tenant, away from the nightmare.